Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in from. It is Friday, so that means just one thing. It is Onwards and Upwards. And today is our favorite show of the month where we are discussing everything immigration. So we know the Visa Bulletin came out earlier this week. So in a couple of moments, we're going to invite our guests out to take all of your questions regarding the Visa Bulletin, etc. So I see a lot of questions coming in already. So we will do our very, very best to get to all of them. For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Deirdre O'Regan. I am the Senior Director of Recruitment here at AMN International. Very excited to see everybody online today. What we love is if you can pop into the chat where you are listening in from today. We love to see where you are, share that with our audience. We have got participation from all over the world, which is always great to see. Hi, Fani. Thank you so much for joining us. I see Han from Kenya. I see Ram from Nepal, Philippines. So representation from all over. Hi again from India. Thank you so much for listening in. Hi, Naomi from Kenya. Thank you for joining. Love to have you on board. Oh, congratulations, Marlene. You will be current this coming January 2025. Testament that it takes patience, but it will happen for you. So we're very excited to host today. This is our last Onwards and Upwards of the year. Can you believe that? We are already almost embracing 2025. So it has been a fast year. And so if you are waiting on becoming current, the time will go quickly. I cannot believe how fast the last couple of years have gone. So if you have not already and you have not applied to AMN International, then this is your opportunity to do it today. So if you want to secure a priority date, if you want to get your I-140 filed in 2024 and have a 2024 priority date, do not delay. So please apply today, amnhealthcare.com/international. We want to help you. We want to file your petition. We have many opportunities, both in staffing and direct. I'll say that again. We are the only organization who offers both. And staffing may be a really good option for you right now. So as you can see up there, we have opportunities all over the country. The United States is a very large continent, and we've got opportunities in almost every state. So this is your call to action. If you take one thing away today, you have not applied to amnhealthcare.com/international, please do so today. Get your place in line, get your priority date in 2024. We have many staffing opportunities available. Our expert recruitment team is on hand, ready to assist you. So please make sure that you are taking that call to action today and getting your place in line. So I know why you are all tuned in today is for our immigration Q&A. So without further ado, I am going to call in our expert panels. They will be no strangers to you. We have got Mike and Chris. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. How are you?
Perfect. I'm really well. Thank you. How are you both doing?
Good.
Yeah, doing well.
Good. Thank you again for joining us. We have lots of questions coming in already, but let's get kicked off with the Visa Bulletin came out just a couple of days ago and advanced a couple of weeks to December 1st, 2022. Chris, was that expected? What are your thoughts on the movement?
Yeah, no. So of course, the Visa Bulletin comes out usually around the 10th of the month, and so it was timely issued. We saw in particular, the Philippine and rest of the world dates move ahead, maybe 2-ish weeks, maybe 10 to 15 days or so. I think that was a little under what we'd hoped. I think some of us were hoping for maybe about a month or two. So that was disappointing. But I think any of the people out there who were expecting any sort of dramatic promotion that it would move, deep into 2023. We're probably disappointed, but we're probably being a little too optimistic in their hope.
Thank you, Chris. Mike, how about yourself? Was that something you were expecting? What are your thoughts on the movement this week?
Well, I was extremely disappointed because this is the year, the time of optimism, a time of hope. This is the holiday cheer, right? I mean, Chris is even wearing a Christmas sweater. So, I mean, come on. Surely we could have gotten more than 2 weeks. I was expecting we would get into early January. I think we've been saying all along that in general, the final action date chart throughout the course of the fiscal year moves up to meet the date for filing chart. So at least on this call, none of us were expecting huge movement, but I would have loved to have seen early January. I think simply psychologically, it would have felt nice to go into, and have a 2023 date kind of a thing. Also, this is, we've talked in the past that the last couple of years, we've seen more quarterly advancements. So we didn't see anything in the last 2 months. So this was our one shot for this quarter. And if that holds true, we won't see movement again in January. We won't see movement again in February. It'll be the bulletin after that before we do. So to some degree, this is what we're riding on for the next couple of months. So in that respect, I was pretty disappointed. But
okay, so you think that we won't see movement for the next 2 months, but we'll start to see movement again after that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, assuming their quarterly pattern continues. Yeah, which they've never announced publicly that that's for sure what they're going to do, but that has been what they've been doing, so it seems likely. But again, as Chris mentioned, anyone who thinks it's going to move deep into 2023 this year is probably overly optimistic and wrong.
Great. Thank you so much. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat, and I really appreciate all of the questions that are pertaining to your particular case. The best way to get the updates that you are requiring is either with your recruiter or your case specialist. So please reach out to them. This immigration Q&A is really to serve the broader audience with the more generic questions, and we certainly don't want to give you misadvice if it's pertaining to your personal case. So please, if you want to reach out to your case specialist or your recruiter, they are on hand to help you with those specific questions. So we have a question here from Jay. And Chris, I'll give this one to you. Jay is wondering what the status of the Healthcare Workforce Resilience Act is, and do we think that it will be enacted?
I do not think it will be enacted anytime soon, and there's a real just sort of fundamental reason for that, which is the U.S. congressional calendar works on a 2-year cycle, and it goes from January 1st of every odd year. So the most recent congressional cycle started January 1st, 2023, and it ends here in about 2.5 weeks on December 31st. Once that happens, any law that has been introduced and not passed by Congress essentially expires and has to be reintroduced in sometime after January 1st, 2025. I obviously don't think there's much of a chance, really any chance of it passing in the next 2.5 weeks, which would then mean it would expire and have to be reintroduced next year. And I do think that a lot of the people who have been pushing for this bill for the last several years, there's still a lot of enthusiasm for the bill. But it remains to be seen in early next year. We'll be participating. Mike and I work with trade associations who work on this. AMN's a member, or at least gets involved as well on these things. And so my guess is we'll establish a new strategy just after the new year. And my guess is the HWRA or something like it will be introduced at some point in 2025. But the short answer is virtually zero chance of anything passing between now and New Year's.
Thank you, Chris. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you for that question. Mike, we've got a number of questions in the chat here as what are the processing timelines right now? And do we expect them to get longer, or is there an opportunity that they may shorten, if that's even a word?
Yeah, so processing timelines, I'm assuming people are referring to an I-140.
Yes, correct.
So the regular processing timelines are varying greatly based upon where your case is actually being processed at. So there are various service centers in the U.S. You do not get a choice of where your case is filed. It is filed based upon a specific formula. There's a chart, and you have no choice. But once it gets filed at that location, the USCIS can move cases around to different offices based upon workflow, and from their perspective, simply balancing out work, and in their ideas, making things more efficient. Whether it really works that way or not is another question. But as a result, your case doesn't always end up being processed where it started out, which creates some inconsistency. So not right now. I got an update yesterday from my team because this was coming up, and we're ranging from 8 to 14 months is what we're seeing on standard I-140s. Now, keep in mind that your priority date is established when your I-140 is filed, not when it is approved. Mm-hmm. So as long as your retrogression line, your line and wait for the priority date is longer than the processing time, you're not losing anything, whether it takes 8 months or 9 months or 11 months. So even if your case is slow, there's no need to upgrade to premium and spend $3,000 for something that's not ultimately going to get you any faster of a green card.
Thank you, Mike. And I am going to keep this one with you. Janelle is asking, this one is for Mike. Why do you think USCIS is so hesitant to go into 2023?
Well, first of all, it's not the USCIS, it's the Department of State that controls the Visa Bulletin. And so they control the flow. And in theory, they do it based upon, they can see how many cases are still pending that are already current, which means they can already be interviewed at consulates, which means they can already have 485 interviews or 45s adjudicated. And they simply look and say, this is all that we can get to in this particular time frame. And so there's no reason for them to move the date forward any further. So they have exposure on those two data points that none of us do.
Thank you so much. So we've got a lot of new viewers that have joined over the last number of sessions. And so we're going to go back to the basics a little bit as the questions continue to come in. So Chris, can you explain to the audience, what is retrogression?
Yeah, so retrogression is really nothing more than the idea that the U.S. immigration system has a quota system. And so for employment-based visas, EB1s, EB2s, EB3s, EB4s, and EB5s, Congress has only allowed the agencies to approve 140,000 of these visas per year. But there is more than 140,000 visa applications that are pending or approved. And therefore, since the number of cases that is pending and approved is greater than the 140,000 that are allowed each year, that overage sort of gets put in a processing queue, and that processing queue is essentially retrogression. And so when the State Department releases a Visa Bulletin and says that the EB3 priority dates for all others, including the Philippines, is November 15th of 2022, that's the State Department essentially saying that there's currently about a 2-year backlog, which is to say there's about twice as many petitions, or really 3 times as many petitions pending as there are visas available in that category.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Mike, can you explain to the audience how do you read the Visa Bulletin? What is the most important thing that you should be looking for as it comes out monthly?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, the Visa Bulletin has 2 charts. There is what they call a final action date chart, and then there is a date for filing chart. Some people refer to them as chart A, chart B. So let's first of all talk about what those different charts mean. So if you are overseas, the final action date chart is the most important for you, because that when your date becomes current, which means your priority date is before the date on the chart, then you can actually have an interview scheduled and have adjudication of your immigrant visa, your green card. If you are in the US, the final action date chart is still important because it obviously means that your 485 can be adjudicated. You can have a personal interview if needed, and you can be approved. But in the US, the date for filing chart is often more important because that is what allows you to file your I-485. And the I-45 filing for US candidates is what allows you to get a EAD card or work card and something called advanced parole, which is a travel document. In theory, the date for filing date is supposed to trigger action from the National Visa Center as well. That's the way it's been set up, and it's even written that way in the Visa Bulletin. However, the National Visa Center has not typically followed that, and often processes cases even though they're not close to becoming current. A couple other things to keep in mind, and when reading the Visa Bulletin, is you're looking at your country of birth, not your country of citizenship. It is country of birth. Also, if you have a spouse and your spouse was born in a different country than you, you can look at whatever chart is more beneficial to you. So if you were born in, say, India, but your spouse was born in the UK, you can look under the what they call rest of the world category. Right now, we've got 4 countries set aside on the chart that have their own columns: China, India, Mexico, the Philippines, and then everybody else country of birth is under what most of us call the rest of the world, ROW category, and everybody else goes under there. Now, you'll notice that the rest of the world and the Philippine categories for both EB2 and EB3 have stayed pretty much lockstep. Historically, that's not always been the case. The Philippines have sometimes fallen behind rest of the world, but for quite a while now, it's been the same. So you need to know your priority date. You need to know the category you're in, whether it's EB2 or EB3. And then you need to know your country of birth. And then you'll simply look at either of those charts.
Thank you so much, Mike. And you mentioned that it is country of birth. And I know that we have a number of nurses and healthcare professionals from India that are tuning in today. And there was a question earlier on, are there any other options besides EB3 for nurses and healthcare professionals who were born in India? Chris.
Sorry, I misheard if you heard that was going to be. There are, but none of them are great options, but some may apply. The one that probably most likely jumps to mind is the H-1B for nurses. But a couple of things about H-1B for nurses, and in particular, how they would impact Indian nationals. First, in order for an H-1B to be approved for a Indian nurse, or for that matter, a nurse from any country, that nurse, first of all, has to hold a BSN. That's fine. We find a good chunk of overseas nurses do have BSNs. Second, though, which is much more challenging, is that the position in the United States must require a BSN. And the reality is the vast majority of U.S. nursing positions require less than a BSN. They require an associate's degree or a diploma, which is usually a 2 or 3 year degree. Because the positions in the U.S. only require a 2 or 3 year degree and not a full 4-year BSN, the USCIS takes the position that most U.S. nursing positions are ineligible for the H-1B. But you'll note that I'm saying most. There are some nursing positions in the U.S. that do require a bachelor's degree. And so if you're an Indian nurse and you are interested in coming to the United States and you want to use the H-1B as an option, you will have to find one of the frankly rare but growing positions in the U.S. that require a bachelor's degree. If you can find that, you can come into the United States and enter on an H-1B. But keep in mind, even if you file for your green card once you're here, you're still going to be subject to the same retrogression. And so, for instance, if you found a U.S. BSN required position and you entered, for simplicity's sake, January 1st, 2025, you would still be on something like a 12 to 14 year retrogression, which means you would not be getting your green card until, the mid 2030s, maybe even late 2030s. So it doesn't help your green card case, but the H-1B can allow you to come into the United States much faster because H-1Bs, I didn't talk about this, but the timing of the H-1Bs is there's two paths. There's something called H-1B cap subject. Those petitions are filed in March. Your case is registered through something called the H-1B lottery. But if you're selected on the lottery and your H-1B petition is approved, you can usually enter the United States in about 6 months. So that's not so bad. So you'd enter in the lottery in March of 2025. You'd get selected. Your H-1B petition would be filed. And it's at that stage, once the H-1B is filed, that you have to make the argument, or your lawyer has to make the argument that the position requires a bachelor's degree. If USCIS agrees, then your approval will be granted such that you can enter the United States sometime after October 1st. So that's not a very long time frame. Even better are what are called H-1B cap exempt entities, which you don't even have to go through that registration process. And that lottery, you can just have your H-1B filed all year. So all of those are good news for H-1Bs, but keep in mind those H-1B eligible nursing positions in the United States are not that plentiful, and so they're difficult to find. The other options that come to mind, just thinking out loud, are we do see a lot of Indian nationals who move to third countries, such as Australia, Canada. Those two come to mind. Those two countries have an expedited process. For Canadians, it's the TN, and for Australians, it's the E3. I won't get into too much on that, other than to say that you have to be a citizen of those countries in order to qualify for those visas. And so what the Indian national could do, perhaps if they were living in Canada or Australia, is become a citizen of Australia or Canada. And that may open up H-1B-like visas available for you.
Thank you, Chris. Lots of great information there. So hopefully that is helping whoever asked that question. So Empire is asking, Mike, do we think rest of world and Philippines EB3 will have different final action dates in the future?
It's certainly reasonable to expect that. There is a reason why the Philippines has historically had, and it's because they will often exceed their country year. However, historically, we have not seen a lot of retrogression in the rest of the world category. So it may be that the Philippine category will not separate. It's simply that the rest of the world has caught up. But I think that's certainly something to potentially anticipate. It will all depend upon whether there's a continued or an increase in Filipino immigration and as compared to the rest of the world.
Thank you so much. Chris, there's a follow-up question on the TN, and Acupil is asking, I want to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. With the way retrogression keeps extending, could it have an impact on the 3-year TN visa? I think I'm interpreting that question correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the question means by impact. I mean, sure. I mean, I guess I do expect that the retrogression for all others and Filipinos will continue to get a little bit worse. So, today it's 2 years and a month. My guess is if we're, when we do this session in March, it might be 2 years and 2 or 3 months. That wouldn't surprise me. Having said that, TN extensions are generally fairly straightforward to obtain. So it's not an enormous difficulty for you to extend your TN to bridge any sort of gap that you have before your green card is issued.
Thank you so much. Mike, Peggy is asking, if her petition is filed, can her spouse travel on an H-2 visa? And will it influence her case?
I think the answer depends upon what her priority date. So the H-2A visa is a non-immigrant visa. If the priority date is not current, then in my opinion, you can make a strong argument that you can maintain non-immigrant intent. H-2As do generally have a tremendous amount of scrutiny, though, associated with them. I would definitely make sure that he discloses to his employer and their immigration counsel that there is an I-140 petition that's been filed where he is a dependent to that. But legally, it is still possible up until when you become current.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, Lucy is asking, so when her priority date becomes current, does NVC schedule interviews based on the priority date or when they are DQ'd?
So normally, well, not normally, you can often schedule your own priority date, your own interview once your priority date is current. So having said that, I don't know particularly the specifics because it depends on the embassy. Each embassy does it a little bit differently. In my mind, I wouldn't get that far into the weeds into the process, but you can definitely contact the paralegal or attorney who can give you a tailored answer to your specific embassy as to how they're going to schedule your particular interview.
Thank you. And Justice, I see your question, and you may have just popped on a little bit later. Your I-140 was filed in December, and it's a year. Mike had shared with us that processing timelines are anywhere from 8 to 14 months. So you're right in that window. So hopefully that helps you. And Akipul has a follow-up question. As a follow-up to her, sorry, there's lots of questions coming through. To a TN visa, can I renew my TN visa while I have an immigrant intent, e.g. an EB3 application pending? Chris.
So the answer is yes, but I definitely suggest that you talk to an attorney who has experience doing it so that the petition is properly prepared to get over that intent concern that you have.
Thank you so much. Mike, kind of flipping back to basics, again, will we ever see retrogression end?
Historically, only in one of two circumstances. Either the law is changed. So, for example, back in the early 2000s, we had a special category called I believe it was Schedule X category. If I recall correctly, Chris was instrumental in making that happen. And we got our own nurses and PTs got our own category for a while. So to some degree, retrogression ended there. We have also had periods of time when the economy was down in the U.S. The U.S. was having a recession or depression, depending on which news channel you watched. And so the demand was very low, and so there was no retrogression. So absent some sort of immigration legislation change or something else catastrophic relative to the economy, retrogression will simply continue.
Thank you. Chris, I'm assuming you're of the same thought there, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
The other thing I'd add too is, sometimes we talk about retrogression in the macro sense, but really retrogression is about you. And so if you have your I-140 filed and you have a priority date of January 1st, 2024, then it sort of doesn't really matter when retrogression begins or ends or how long it is. For you, you're just looking for your priority date to become current. And the second piece of this is, if you're thinking of getting into talking to AMN, getting a job offer, and going through this process, the one thing I would not do is wait until retrogression ends, because as Mike outlined, the chances of retrogression ending are pretty slim. But what you can do is you can get in the queue. It'll take currently a little more than 2 years. It might drift up to 2.5 years, maybe even get to 3 years. But Mike and I can tell you that over since the 90s, since we've both been doing this, a 2 or 3 year retrogression is probably about average. It's not very long historically. So what you should do is, if you're thinking of getting into getting in and interviewing with AMN and getting into the I-140 process, really what you should do is you should begin that process, pass your NCLEX and get a job offer and get your path started.
Thank you. Great advice, Chris and Mike. And so that's your call to action today. Is if you have not applied with AMN Healthcare International, do so today. There is still time in 2024 to get your I-140 filed if we act now, and to secure that priority date in 2024. There isn't a lot. We only have 2 weeks before the end of the year. We're going into the holidays here next week. So great advice from Chris and Mike. If there's one thing that you take away today is that, and get your place in line. If you're waiting for retrogression to end, to Mike and Chris's point, that's not likely. So thank you for that. So Mike, what are the qualifications that a nurse needs to qualify for an EB3 visa?
So in order to file an I-140, the nurse needs to meet the educational requirements and have an NCLEX pass. Educational requirements will vary a little bit by employer, but generally are an associate's degree or sometimes even a diploma program will be acceptable for some states and some hospitals, but you need to meet the educational standards and then the NCLEX pass. That is all you need in order to file an I-140. Now, when you get to the time for your interview, you need to have something that we all commonly refer to as a visa screen, which historically was issued by CGF&S, but is now also being issued by Joseph Silney. And I believe there's a third organization that I saw an announcement on recently. And that visa screen has an English test component to it that you have to score above a certain English, depending upon the type of test. That is a part of the visa screen, which is not needed to file the I-140, but is needed for the green card. So I would say education, passing the NCLEX, and passing the English test are the basic criteria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. So hopefully that helps. David has a question for Chris, but it's kind of a more broad question that we'll pose to Chris is if they are DQ'd, but there's some error on their application, like their name has been spelled incorrectly. What impact would that have, if any?
Well, it would depend on what the error is. So I would certainly contact the attorney who worked on your visa so that they can get that straightened out for you.
Great. Thank you so much. Hopefully that helps, David. We do get questions like that a lot. There are errors on applications, like a name spelled incorrectly, etc. So Chris's advice is connect with the attorney who processed your case to make sure that you're getting the correct information there. Mike, is there a pathway to transition from a temporary work visa to permanent residency?
Sure. I mean, the most common temporary work visa that's been talked about already on here is the H-1B, which, as Chris mentioned, is limited availability for RNs, but some. There's also a lot of other allieds that might be on this call that may have H-1Bs, med techs, PTs, OTs, pharmacists, et cetera. And all of them are eligible to transition or go through the green card program. They go through it differently. RNs and PTs have a special route. Everybody else goes through the same route called PERM. So yes, you can transition. The same with a TN. Someone earlier mentioned about being here on a TN and whether 2.5 years is long enough. And so you can transition from a TN to a green card as well. Other non-immigrant visas that you can transition from, student visas. A lot of times international workers are here in the U.S. On an F1. gone to school, graduated with a BSN or maybe even a master's, and they will transition to a green card. Given retrogression, that has some complexities to it, but it can certainly be done. Most other non-immigrant visas you cannot transition from. So typically, if you're here as a visitor and you're visiting your family, that is not something you can generally transition from. And then there's other types of non-immigrant visas, dependent visas and things like that. But yes, you can definitely transition from a non-immigrant visa to a green card.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Chris, we have a question on dependents. So under the EB3, dependents are spouse and children under the age of 21. Are there any options to bring extended family members like parents, for example? And how long does that process take?
So the short answer is no. When you obtain an immigrant visa, that immigrant visa is for you, it's for your spouse, and it's for any under 21-year-old children. In terms of parents, you'll need to sponsor them. The way you can sponsor them is 5 years down the road. So what you would do is you enter the United States as a U.S. permanent resident. That makes you eligible for U.S. citizenship in 5 years in most instances. You'll need to apply for U.S. citizenship and become a U.S. citizen. U.S. citizens are allowed to sponsor for their overseas parents through what's called an I-130, which is somewhat similar to an I-140. And that process currently takes also about a year. So the short answer is no, you can't bring your parents in right away. The longer answer is in about 7 or so years, you will be able to bring your parents in, assuming you meet all the interim qualifications throughout that process.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of the advice here today. Lots of questions coming in. Oladega, we did reference when we think retrogression will end. Unfortunately, we don't, but it's something that we think will be around for quite some time. There were only 2 instances that Mike shared with us earlier where that did happen. So Mike, there's a question here. There's a couple of questions. Let's take Doreen's first. What happens when one of your dependents turns 21 while still in the process due to retrogression? So great question. We get this a lot. Mike.
Yeah, so unfortunately, retrogression does not put a hold on your children aging. And so if your child turns 21 and you're still waiting in the queue, that child is not protected. So there is a rule called the Child Status Protection Act that does provide some relief for children, but it mainly provides processing relief. So there is a formula. For example, they take the a period of time that your I-140 has been pending and they add it to your child's age, and that they set an artificial 21st birthday. So there's a variety of different rules in effect for that. What you want to do is if you have a child that is turning 21, frankly, any child, if you're starting in the process and you've got a child that's, in my opinion, probably 17 or older, you would want to reach out to your case specialist manager so that they're aware of that and take as many steps as possible to protect your child. But what we often find is that they're simply not an option. And so your child would then be looking at options they may have, whether it's to come in as a student, if they're college age, or whether it's to ultimately get a degree and land a job that gets them an H-1B, or a variety of other things that they would do on their own. But generally, children over 21 are not going to be able to immigrate with you.
Thank you, Mike. And that is a question that we get a lot. So Mike has just summed it up there for you. And also working with AMN Healthcare International, we have been doing this for over 40 years. So our team will guide you in that direction as well, and also make sure what is possible and what we think is not possible regarding your dependents. Mary has a question. Chris, what's your advice if she needs to change a dependent status from a company to follow to join?
Yeah. So what I definitely do think is that you should contact your immigration attorney to, first of all, make sure your dependent qualifies. For instance, there could be an age out concern there. But ultimately, if you're already in the United States and you're dependent, your under 21-year-old child, for instance, is outside the United States, you normally have to file what's called an I-824, which will allow that embassy to reschedule that or really set that dependent's embassy. But again, I want to caution that because in some instances you don't have to do that, which is why I think it's important that you contact an immigration attorney to walk you through that process.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, a lot of the questions are coming in, and it's great. I love to see the interaction, the engagement. But a lot of the times, if it's specific to your particular case, then that will be the advice: is go back and consult with your case specialist, your attorney, your recruiter, to make sure that that you are getting the correct information pertaining to your particular case. Mike, I'm not familiar with this, but I'll ask you, could they activate back the H-1C visa temporarily during this time?
Well, the H-1C was never really used for RNs. Mm-hmm. The H-1A was, but it went away in maybe 88 or 89. Something like that. H-1C had very, very limited options for both facilities, and there were some workarounds, but it was not a widespread program that would have really affected. I don't know that I've seen any legislative push to create a new non-immigrant visa for RNs. So I think the odds of something like H-1A revival or H-1C being expanded, I would say would not happen. And certainly under the next administration, would be extremely unlikely.
Thank you, Mike. So I have one more question for Chris, and then we'll turn it over for final advice to everybody who is listening in today. So Chris, there are some embassies that are experiencing significant backlogs. Is there anything being done to remedy that situation or try and speed up timelines in certain embassies across the world?
Yeah, no, we've definitely seen a few of the embassies really slow down. And I guess I'd say two things with respect to that. The first is it's not uncommon for these embassy slowdowns to happen at this time of the year. Right. The reality is those embassies are staffed by human beings, and those human beings tend to go on more vacations and take more leaves at this time of year. And therefore the embassy just has less personnel in order to do the background checks and ultimately to do the visa interviews. So I wouldn't get too over concerned for the slowdowns that happen in the November, December timeframe. They seem to happen every year. So the good news is I expect come January and certainly by February, you may see some of those embassies pick back up. So that's one thing. Two, we've got through our office and Mike's office and a lot of the law firms that do this do have some back channel avenues with some of the embassies that we've been thankfully been given access to through the State Department. Candidly, that's fairly new, so it remains to be seen just how well that's going to work. And so I would suggest that you have your attorney use some of those back channel emails and contacts in order to try and see what the situation is with your particular case.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Lots of questions coming in depending on where your case was filed. But good to hear, Chris said that, I know that there are some embassies that have significant backlogs, but this time of year you can expect more delays, just like we take vacation over the holidays. These individuals do as well. So I want to be respectful of Mike and Chris's time. This is our last show of the year. So I want to take the opportunity to thank them both for turning up and giving all of this great advice every single month. So happy holidays to you both. But loving the holiday sweater, Chris. I have my Christmas tree behind me here. This is just one of them. It's been up since November 7th. So yeah, that's that. So lots of comments coming in the chat. Mike had said it earlier, is that a little disappointing with the movement in the Visa Bulletin this month, and given their quarterly guidance that they had, we don't think that we'll see movement in the next couple of months until next quarter. So Mike, what would you say? How do our listeners remain motivated during this time? There's a lot of comments coming in. I'm disappointed. When will I be current? And again, those are questions specific to your case. So please reach out to your case specialist or your recruiter. But what would you say, Mike, to keep our audience encouraged and motivated while they wait?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. Number one is, part of this is perspective and our expectation and setting that properly. And for at least the last year, we've been talking about a process that from beginning, meaning I filed my I-140, to the end of I'm actually got my interview and now potentially am able to fly in, is in the 2+ year range. We're now talking 2.5, and as Chris mentioned earlier on the call, we could potentially get up to 3, but we're in that 2.5 year range right now. What we saw for a few years due to the COVID situation was an aberration where we didn't have that 2.5 year wait. We're back to normal now. So if you look at the big picture perspective of from the time I filed my case to when I expect to get interviewed is 2.5 years, then we're less concerned about the fact that it didn't move forward as much as we all wanted to move forward. So I think that's one thing. Put it into perspective from a long-term perspective, we're still within that 2.5. The fact that we're disappointed with the January bulletin does not change the ultimate of we're at the 2.5 year mark. So that's number one. And number two is you can only take care of what you can control. We can't control the Visa Bulletin. We wish we could, but we can't. It's way out of our hands, way above our pay grade, as that phrase goes. And so that's nothing you can deal with. So you can only control things like if you're not in the process yet, get in the process, get a job, pass that English exam, keep your clinical skills up to date. All the things that you can control, and then you will, if you stay patient, stay in the queue, you'll be fine.
Thank you, Mike. And I know that Chris echoes all of that. We say this every single month. So get your place in line today. Follow the advice of our expert panel. But thank you again to you both. We will see each other in 2025 to talk about the next Visa Bulletin that comes out. I wish you both happy holidays. Hope you guys are doing lots of fun stuff with friends and family. And thank you so much. And we will speak to you in the new year.
Thanks,
you. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
All right, so that was our final immigration Q&A for the year. So we're still getting a lot of questions that are pertaining to your particular circumstance. So I encourage you to reach out to your recruiter, your case specialist, your attorney. We want to make sure that you're getting the right information. So lots of engagement in the chat today. And I know that both Chris and Mike gave some great advice and also just back to basics, right? So if you have been on these shows quite regularly, then you know that stuff, but we get a lot of new viewers. So wanted to take the opportunity to make sure that we had the basics covered and then move forward from there. So please take the advice, apply today. There is very, very little time to get your priority date in 2024. In the next couple of weeks, you're looking at a priority date of 2025. So as the Visa Bulletin is moving, then, and it is moving, it may be moving slowly, but it is moving, and we can see what that's going to look like next month. But don't wait. It will do what it will do. And Mike said that's not in our control. So apply today, amnhealthcare.com/international. We have many opportunities available for you. Staffing opportunities will be probably the best way forward for you right now, because you don't need to have a secure job in order to file your I-140. You've got time. You've got time to find your perfect or close to perfect opportunity while you are in the process. So make sure that you take that advice. That is what you can control. So if you are not already in the process, please make sure that you do that today. All right. So we're going to talk about some upcoming shows, and there is a couple of other questions that I want to address in a couple of minutes as after we talk about the upcoming shows. I'm sorry we had the graphic and then it came away because I got distracted with all of the questions that were coming in. So Anu, here are our upcoming shows. So we have got AMN Academy every Monday at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So as per usual, the first Monday is going to be all about NCLEX. The third Monday is going to be all about NCLEX, and that is with our Dr. Paul, and he will be going through everything you need to know to successfully pass your NCLEX exam. The second and the fourth Monday are all about English. So we know that this is a requirement. You have got to pass your English exam in order to qualify for your visa screen. So the second Monday is going to be all about English, and then your fourth Monday hosted by our partner, Niner. So please make sure that you are tuning in. Some great information is available in those shows to really prepare you for either passing your NCLEX or passing your English. Okay, so please make sure that that is on your calendar so that you can attend. Okay, so there's a couple of questions coming in here as well about the HWRA. We did address that. Not likely that will pass in here before the end of the year. But if you want to go back and listen to Chris and when he thinks or what he thinks will happen then. Okay, so we've got one more show that we want to talk about here. So if we can pull that up. Okay, so we have got the LaFora talk show on December 17th. So please make sure that you are marking your calendars and tuning in there. We get lots and lots of participation in these shows. And we also have our podcast, Nursing in America. So please make sure that you have that downloaded and that you are listening to that. But as we wrap up 2024, I cannot believe that it has gone so quickly. And if you are in the waiting game right now, waiting for your priority date to become current, just think back and look back at how quickly the last couple of years have gone. The time goes very, very quickly. So if you are waiting for timelines to speed up, etc., don't. Get your place in line today. And we heard from a nurse here today where she is going to be current in January of 2025. So I'm sure that took some time and I'm sure that took some patience, but she remained motivated, she remained committed, and she really controlled what was in her control. And now in less than 4 weeks, she is going to be current and be here in the United States soon. So that should encourage everybody who is listening in today. That should keep you motivated. Is time goes so quickly. So please make sure that you are availing of our expert information, our expertise in this area for over 40 years. You heard it from Chris and Mike as well. They say it every single month. Don't delay. Get your place in line today. So I would like to say happy holidays to everybody who is listening in. I know that we have those who listen in every 2 weeks, and then we have new viewers that this is new information to you. So I would like to wish you all very happy holidays. However you are celebrating, I hope that you get to spend some quality time with family and friends, and looking forward to seeing you all again in the new year. Stay safe, and until then, onwards and upwards.